crazy to even think about now. It's so many years, but the part of the way Dublab formed actually was there was a bunch of us that were working at a radio station called KSCR, which was USC's pirate radio station. It wasn't technically legal. We were broadcasting on bandwidths that the FCC frowned upon, and thusly shut us down. And in shutting us down, they were actually hunting after other like kind of weird indie radio at the time, but they shut us down in the same manhunt for this other station that was breaking more rules than us. And we were forced to basically make a decision. Either we were going to go just campus-wide and kind of keep a very small template, or we were going to go really broad and do this new thing of the internet to broadcast online. Now, it still wasn't that many people were tuning in or anything, but it was this kind of brave new world of like no more rules, no more like needing to only play certain kind of music. We didn't fit into the CMJ top playlists, so we were instantaneously, as much as we were expanding our audience base at the time, we also were taking off all the promo lists because we didn't fit in anymore with the normal broadcast scheme. So we had to kind of go inward, and so we started to broadcast all of this electronic music, what we were unable to get like sent to us from these small labels in the UK and elsewhere, but what we were able to, just because of our own passion, kind of obtain and play. So we suddenly we took this weird shift from being like kind of a general indie music station to this really electronic focused station, at the same time not really cared about, but really intent. And so we ended up getting all these weird people from around the world hitting us up to kind of figure things out. And part of that was this gentleman who ended up being the co-founder of Dublab. Hit us up, just kind of had this idea of having a station that would focus on this new emerging electronic music culture for the US in a place that ended up being called Dublab.
Sweet.
Strangely enough, I was the one that fielded that call, but at the time the music director was, or the general director was Frosty, Mark McNeil, and I passed the phone over to him. And they ended up forming Dublab together. Later on, this gentleman went his separate ways, and Dublab has continued to this day. And part of the reason Dublab has continued, just as a sidebar, is because it never corporatized, it never kind of went that way. Every other station that seemed to have been up at the same moment, they all got sold to AOL and to the other things for not small amounts of money, especially the internet bubble that was of the early aughts. And they all are gone. Nothing's around except for Dublab still doing its thing, and I think it has to do with the fact that it didn't sell.
Yeah.
Didn't sell its soul.
Well, congrats.
Oh,
yeah, I love Dublab. I listen in all the time. We'll rewind a little bit for the people who do or don't know. Your mother, oil painter, correct?
Printmaker,
and oil painter.
Teacher, yeah.
Awesome. Did that affect your creative side at all? What were your parents playing when you were a little kid, basically?
Yeah, they had a weird record collection.
Yeah.
Yeah. I often think of them as being kind of in between as well. Like they weren't bohemian beatniks, nor were they hippies. They were born somewhere in between those two moments. They could have easily probably swum in either sea. They're great thinkers, really creative minds, but both of them, yeah, they didn't have their exact cultural zeitgeist to kind of play with. And I'm sure they could actually point towards lots of movements and things that they did do stuff with, but just those two major points that people seem to talk about, they didn't exist in. And the record collection kind of reflects it. They had plenty of Joan Baez and kind of weird folk kind of moments, but then they also had lots of music concrete and like John Cagean things. And as a kid, I don't know about you guys, but like Cage and that stuff is not always the most like invigorating music.
At that age, yeah.
Like just total atonality, like completely like just noise and silence. And Xenakis was in their collection as well, and like weird stuff. But it really turned me around later. Like that was the kind of stuff that really fueled my fire. Like a lot of, I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Reich's like earlier work is tape manipulation stuff. My parents have like a pretty extensive collection of non-such records and stuff like that. And like Steve Reich's Come Out to Show 'Em, which was sampled by Madlib later.
Oh, wow.
You guys might be familiar with it through that, but it's just like this crazy like 18-minute long tape drift. Just awesome. And
Unreal.
like, yeah, and like, I don't think either of my parents really fully utilized the recording like I did later with drugs, but it's powerful stuff. It really is. Yeah, it's really amazing recording, and so it played into it now. So that's my parents' collection, and their creative lives informs, it has to, I mean, your parents have to inform what you do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
My father used to play Cheeseburgers in Paradise, that Jimmy Buffett song.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I literally, it's paradise when I'm eating cheeseburgers. Unreal.
That's beautiful.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think actually, but on the flip side of it, I think one of the reasons I got into lounge music and like exotica is because my parents looked down on it.
Wow.
They fully like loved MC5 and all this punk stuff, but how else are you going to rebel? And I started loving like Xavier Cugat.
The exact opposite, yeah. Driving them crazy.
Yeah, that was the only time they've ever complained to me. Well, they've complained about plenty of things, but the only time they've ever like singled out one of my music selections was when I was playing some like
no Cugat.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Putting their foot down for
So you were hearing all of this, and then you probably started playing an instrument at that point. What was it? What was the first one?
I was very lucky that in Santa Monica at the time when I was growing up, they had a very really strong early music program.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I was in like second grade or something, they rolled out an orchestra in our auditorium, and they had the orchestra play some silly song or something. Probably junior high orchestra or whatever, but it was still it was remarkable at the time. Maybe it was even older players. Maybe it was like more like knowing what they're doing kind of players. And they told everyone in the auditorium just to pick an instrument they wanted to follow. And I pointed out the most awesome instrument I could, and it was the bassoon.
Oh, wow.
And they told me, you're too young and small to play the bassoon, so they put me on clarinet, which is not the most awesome. No. But I pursued that clarinet for a long time, trying to get to bassoon, and I never did. But I got to bass clarinet, which is an awesome instrument, back to awesome instruments. And then later on, they switched me over. They gave me an opportunity to play double bass. And so my love of all things bass was really allowed to flourish.
And you continued after
bass is
middle
actually
school?
what I took through to college.
Oh, nice. Actually,
before electronic music made any sense to me, I thought I was just going to be a jazz bass player. I went to school for jazz bass. It really was a foolhardy gamble that somehow my background, my love of good sound and classic songs like the Great American Songbook, these wonderful composers, somehow would win out over my lack of talent. That a love for something does not mean talent for something, and I'm very happy to have been freed from the prison of jazz. Jazz prison.
Jazz prison.
Yeah, it's a very angular prison. Swear to God. It's the smallest things, but it really is.
Yeah. And so going from jazz and sort of more of an analog or acoustic approach to electronics, this whole world of possibility, how did you jump into that? What was really the catalyst into that?
So listening to the records, having no idea how they're making the sound, no idea the sequencing and the programming and stuff. And it wasn't until college where I started to, not only, in addition to take these jazz courses, there was some elective courses to deal with synthesis. And it actually, it's funny that when I first went to USC, that's where I went to school for jazz, when I first went there, I ended up getting a tour around the facilities. And the person who gave me the tour, his name is Dimitri Fergadis. And he ends up running the Thalocyanine label. He's Thalocyanine. He runs Thalo Recordings. It's a really obscure, strange CDR label that was around in the early aughts. And now it continues existence as Thalocyan, which is, or just Cyan, which is a weird, again, another weird label. But he's like, at the same time that he's touring me around, he's working on putting out records by like very strange, fringe electronic artists that are mainly distributed just in the back pages of Wire magazine. The kind of really heady electronic music magazine. So like very fringe, but he ends up giving me a tour around. I don't make the connection whatsoever, but because of his interests, he tours me around the electronic music program. I don't even touch base with that again for another 2 years. The truth of the matter is no matter how these windy roads move around, every little thing that affects us. Have you ever seen the movie The Butterfly Effect?
Yes.
I haven't, but I've heard stories about it, and I've heard it's real, and I believe it very strongly. Yeah. The strangest things that impact our lives kind of somehow, if they really are given room to germinate and flourish, they will. And so the early exposure to the electronic music courses, I ended up taking that course 7 times just because I wanted to spend time with those synthesizers. And all my early approach is based on the same idea of signal path. And if you look at even these complicated DAWs and programming languages, they're all about signal path. They're all about the way you get sound out to output, you know, the way it goes through. And no matter how many complications or how many lines of code, it's still that same path of just water going to its easiest place.